to my channel. So today I'm going to go through all of the spring quote-unquote palettes that I really want to dive into over the course of the next few months. So every season for the last couple of seasons now, I've been putting a group of palettes that I want to use. They're not necessarily quote-unquote that season palettes. So for my winter palettes, they were just palettes that I wanted to use over the winter. And spoiler alert, I did use them all. So I'm very pleased with how I'm going about this. I obviously pull palettes for my Shop My Stash and various other projects. But this gives me an idea of, over the course of the next 3 months, like which palettes do I really want to use, which ones are going to embody like what I'm feeling right now. And obviously I do kind of base most of it on seasonal feelings. So there's going to be a lot more brighter colors now that we're venturing into spring as opposed to all of my winter palettes. But I think the difference is sometimes I'm going to pull a palette in and you're going to look at it and you're going to think, well, that's not necessarily a spring palette, but it's a palette that I want to use over the spring, if that makes sense. All right, so anyway, let's get through this list because I actually have quite a lot of palettes here. I'm going to go through the ones that I pulled recently for my Shop My Stash because I've pulled them already. Kind of already spoken about them, and I think they're all ones that I do want to use over the coming month, and we will be going into spring during that time. So I feel like they should be in this video. So I did pull the What's Up Beauty Geodes palette. I think this is gorgeous, and I do think it is actually a good spring palette. I think it's just one of these bright, fun palettes, but also has quite a lot of neutral shades, so you can kind of get away with it if you want to go for like everyday. So this one I pulled. I also pulled this one. This is from Gloss Gods. It's one of their Let's Pop. I'm not a huge fan of this, so I pulled it because I wanted to get a little bit more use on it. Wanted to feel really if I want to potentially declutter this or not, or maybe just depot it because I do like these two. Actually, I like all three of these. I just don't like these two shades. So this is a palette that I want to use. It's also perfect for spring if you are into like peachy tones over the course of spring or summer. It's perfect for that time. But for me, honestly, it's more about figuring out if I want to keep the whole palette or just depot it. I also pulled the Gal on Mars from Gloss Gods. This one I want to get more use out of because I bought it in December and I really haven't got too much use on it. And I do think some of these brighter colors will be pretty. It looks pretty dark, but there's a lot of orange like flips in here. There's some red, there's some pinks and purples. And I think just using this in conjunction with some other palettes would be a lot of fun. So this one I'm going to be using. I also pulled my Galactic Visitor from Singe Beauty. I got quite a lot of use out of this in January, but I wanted to pull it again because I want to just go into it. I don't look at this as a spring palette, but now that I look at it, I kind of think maybe it could be. Maybe it could be, but I actually just pulled it because I want to go into it a little bit more. And I really like the quality when I went into it. So, yeah, it's just one of the ones where I'm like, I'm itching to go back into it. So I definitely want to use it over spring. If you can hear a lot of background noise, my son is here. It is Saturday as I'm filming. I don't usually film on Saturdays just simply because, you know, I don't like to block him out of the filming area, but he's, you know, he is in the background enjoying his Saturday cartoons. But anyway, so this is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde. It is, to me, a very spring-like palette, and I've pulled it because I want to use it. So those are all the ones that are currently in my Shop My Stash. I think I've already gone into one of the ones, actually, that I pulled from my Shop My Stash, so I'm not going to mention it. Okay, these next ones are not in projects. They are not in my Shop My Stash, but they are ones that I want to randomly grab from my drawers over the course of the next few months. So this first one is not your typical spring palette. So that's why I said, you know, this list for me is more personal because they're not necessarily spring palettes. But I want to go back into the Gloss Gods Molten Metals because this is another one that I was a little bit disappointed in. Not really because the quality was bad, because the quality was really good in this one. I just expected a little bit more from this palette. So I want to go back into it with like new eyes, a fresh sense of expectations, I guess, and just see how I really feel because I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this palette. So this is more me kind of figuring out. So this one I want to go into at some point. I also want to go back into my BH Cosmetics Summer Saint-Tropez. I love this palette and I have noticed the formula is going a little bit. So I want to get as much use as possible out of the shades that I do enjoy in this palette. before I sadly have to let it go. I also have the Flower Moon from Ensley Rain Cosmetics. Now, this is not a brand that I am supporting at the moment, but I do have this palette and I spent a lot of money on it. So for me personally, this is quite a spring palette. So I would like to put some use out of it, get my money's worth and use it over the next few months, simply because honestly, it is very, very pretty. Okay, moving on, we have a palette from Glamshop. This is the Sorbetti. I actually have a couple of palettes here from Glamshop that I want to go into. So this one I think is really, really pretty. I really like the bright tones of this, and I think it's perfect for spring, even maybe potentially summer. But yeah, I really want to go back into this, especially the shimmers. I mean, the shimmers are really what sold me on these palettes. But this is definitely one where I just think that kind of screams spring, and I want to go into it. Next up, we have another Gloss Gods. This is Gal on the Moon. So this one I haven't gone into that much. This has a lot more blue and actually is a little bit darker. So typically, I wouldn't normally look at this and say, oh yeah, that's so spring. But I want to go into it because I haven't actually used it that much. And it does have some pops of color. And again, it would be more of a companion palette because it's all shimmers. So I probably just dip into this when and if it works with a different look that I'm using from a different palette. But yeah, I definitely want to go back into this and get a little bit more use. The other palette from Glamshop is this one. I really enjoy this one. It's not that different. It's just more of a muted color story versus the other one that I just showed you, but I would love to get more use out of all of these shimmers and colors. I just think both of these palettes are just so stunning and beautiful, and I don't know, maybe I don't talk about them enough, but I think Glamshop quality is really fun, and their shimmers are very flaky. So I can understand if people maybe don't want like super flaky indie makeup, because theirs are really, really flaky. So each to their own, it's fine. Okay, then I have this one from Menagerie Cosmetics. This is the Feral. This is not typically a favorite of mine, but I kind of want to go back into this over the next few months. It is a little darker, and it's not, for me, a spring palette by any means, but I still want to go into it because it's kind of been sitting in my collection for a good few months now, and there are some brighter tones, so I can definitely dip into this and do like a brighter spring look. It's just some of these mattes are pretty dark, but the formula is so beautiful with Menagerie. I always have a fun time regardless of it. And then I also want to go into my other one from them, which is the Killer Pearl. This is the one that I appreciate the most. It's obviously a little bit lighter than the last one and a little bit more neutral, and I do want to go into this one as well. This again kind of speaks to me a little bit more of a summer palette, if I'm going to be honest, but I still want to go into it over the next few months. So we'll see. We'll see if I actually end up going into any of these palettes. So far, the last 2 times I've done this, I've managed to go into all of the palettes that I've chosen for that season, but we will see. Next up, we've got one from Cosmic Beauty. This is the Lovers palette. Obviously, this is newer, and this is very spring-like. It came out for Valentine's Day, and then I think leading into spring, it kind of still works. So I think I want to go into more of the pinks. I haven't actually ventured into the pinks and purples too much in this palette. And then some of these minty shades as well, I haven't really gone into. So there's quite a lot that I still want to touch in this palette, and I think it is a decent one for spring. Then we have my Gourmand Girls Peach Perfect. So I've been saying all year, or maybe 9 months, 10 months, that this is a palette that I'm going to wait for spring. Every time I've gone into it prior to that, I'm like, oh, I'm not really into these tones. So now we are venturing into the time of year when I'm going to want to go into peaches. It just happens every single spring. It's kind of what happens. And I'm already wearing kind of more green these days. So I'm thinking I'll probably get a little bit more use out of this. I'm hoping, because I do like the formula of this. I just have struggled a little bit with the color story. Even though I thought the color story was beautiful when I bought it. That's why I bought it. But I don't know. I'm hoping that this is the time that I fall in love with this palette. If not, then I can maybe I'll realize that maybe these types of palettes are not for me. But yeah, this one definitely want to use over the next few months. Okay, we just have 2 left, and they're both from Cosmic Beauty. All right, so I have the Serenity palette. This one's a little bit darker, but I do want to go back into it because it does have some pretty spring shades. So I've had quite a lot of issues with the black down here. It kept cracking and making a mess, so I ended up getting rid of it completely. They have a black matte in all of their palettes, so I'm not going to miss it by any means. So just ignore that. But I do feel like there's a lot of tones in here that does scream spring to me. even though this looks primarily blue and dark, you know, you do have the pops of color, and those are the ones that I'm mostly going to be looking in. You've got some pastel shades as well. I think this is a really interesting palette, and I've always said that, and it's been kind of a surprise to me that I've enjoyed it so much. So I'm going to go into this one for sure, because why not? And then it wouldn't be a proper spring if I didn't go into the Delicious Delights. I can't speak today. This one is absolutely gorgeous. Screams spring to me. It'll also be summer too. This one is just so colorful and so much fun. I definitely want to go into this over the next few months, maybe more than once as well, because obviously I do a lot of, you know, panning content, as you know, and so I can't always use a palette over and over again if I have my Pan That palettes, my Project Level Up, and whatnot. So these ones usually only get like one look and that's it, but I'm hoping that I can get a little bit more looks out of them. But anyway, that is the list of all of the palettes that I want to be going into the next few months. What do you guys think? So expect to see these all maybe in Instagram Reels, like YouTube Shorts and all that stuff, and then also maybe some get ready with me's. I'm sure I will also throw some of these other ones into the next Shop My Stash, because that's generally how I'm able to get through the list. But yeah, if there's obviously any more that I want to use, I will pull them. But these are definitely like my priority palettes that I want to go through over the course of the next few months. So thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you next time. Bye.